What's up, guys? Wiggy here, workingclassfitness.com, shooting yet another follow-up video to one of my original Tabata videos, answering some questions as to whether or not certain exercises would be good to use for Tabata intervals and why. Now, this question comes from Jeff L., YouTube username OctoB3R Road, something like that. I had to write that down. I probably totally butchered that, so sorry, dude. But anyway, Jeff's question was about 3 exercises, like a bicycle crunch, like a bicycle high knee crunch type deal, running in place with high knees, and swimmers. Now, the bicycle crunch, I'm sure you probably realize what that is. Lying on your back, your legs up in the air, and kind of mimicking a bicycle, crank pedaling a bicycle, that kind of a thing. Running in place with high knees, you know what that is. And then swimmers. I hope I'm kind of understanding this correctly, because I didn't really know what he was referring to, so I asked him, and he came back and he described it. And basically, it's kind of lie face down on the ground and kind of mimic a swimming motion with the opposite arm and leg moving in at one time, and that sort of thing. So anyway, with that being said, I'll just kind of run through each of the 3 exercises, and we'll determine whether or not they're any good for Tabatas. The bicycle crunch there. Not really. In fact, all 3 of them really is not really. None of them would I use for Tabata intervals. And the reasoning is, again, kind of the same as the vast majority of exercises that I seem to get asked about, is that none of them, although all of them, have kind of the short range of motion. If you watch the original Tabata interval video, that's precipitated a lot of these follow-ups, a lot of these questions. The 2 main things that I talked about are the 2 main characteristics that a movement or an exercise or whatever has to have in place for them to be beneficial or useful for to be used with Tabata intervals, i.e. 8 rounds of 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. They've got to have a short range of motion, and that it cannot take very long to complete one rep or execution of the movement, so that you can constantly do more and more reps within a very short time frame, or within that 20 seconds. And then it has to just be able to make you work like a mofo. Again, going back to the original Tabata research, they were working at 170% of VO2 max. So can that make you work that hard? Can it get you breathing that hard? So that's kind of what you have to look at. Now, all 3 of these exercises can have a fairly short range of motion, and that you could probably always consistently try and compress one more movement or one more rep or execution of the movement within a 20-second time frame. But none of them are really going to allow you to work hard enough. Now, that's not to say they're not going to allow you to work hard, or that you couldn't get a good workout. I don't mean that at all. There's a lot of movements that would allow you to work hard and get you breathing and be a good workout. However, they can't allow you to work as hard, with the type of intense effort that is needed to appropriately perform Tabata intervals. Now, the one thing I would end up saying then is, if you're going to do these things, the thing that too many people end up getting wrapped up in is they think Tabata, Tabata, Tabata. It's all going to be Tabata. It's all going to be Tabata. Can this movement be used with Tabata intervals? And if not, then, well, let me shit-can that and let me figure out something else you can be used. And that's not the case. There's nothing that says you've got to use Tabata intervals for anything. In fact, while I know how beneficial Tabata intervals can be, I rarely ever prescribe them because of many of the reasons I've discussed about in my videos. So what I would rather do is I'd rather see people, especially if they're doing various movements, instead of just for strict cardiovascular conditioning, but they're doing it for overall work capacity, they're doing it for muscular conditioning as well, or what have you. Do something with tempo intervals. In fact, some sprint coaches, I believe Charlie Francis, was either Charlie, I can't remember right now. I want to say Charlie Francis used it, or James Smith, i.e. the thinker, talked about it, or maybe he talked about some stuff Charlie Francis did. I don't totally remember now off the top of my head. I'll have to look it up. But they did some work with, basically running in place with high knees, like you're talking about, Jeff, and just did it for tempo intervals. And did it as tempo work. Couldn't really do it as like Tabata type, intervals, simply because it wouldn't allow you to work hard enough. But you could use it as, or utilize it as tempo work so that you're still working at a higher intensity or a harder effort, but you're not working at absolute maximal, holy shit, I'm about to die type effort. So if that's the case, then look at it and say, all right, well, if we want to utilize these exercises for tempo intervals, the thing that does is throw the shackles of the Tabata protocol off and say, okay, well, we can kind of arrange this whole thing differently. We can use more intervals. We can use longer intervals. We can use a different work-to-rest ratio or work-to-rest time. Look at it and say, just because, oh my God, I can't use this for Tabatas, that doesn't mean you can't use it or you shouldn't use it. Just use it in a different way. Now, remember that if you're going to be doing, like Tabata intervals, if you think of effort and you look at, or intensity and you look at duration or how long you're working, let's say those things, not to get all sciencey or whatever, but let's say those two things are on a graph. And you've got on one axis, you've got intensity, and then on the other axis, you've got duration. Well, there's a line for one, a line for the other, and at some point, those lines are going to cross, right? Well, there's the perfect intersection of intensity and duration for Tabata intervals. Well, when you go to tempo intervals, there's also the perfect intersection of intensity and duration. It's just in a different point. So, while the intensity might come down or how hard you're working might come down, the duration will have to extend out. It'll have to be a little bit longer. Or maybe you'll have to, either duration per interval or number of intervals, whatever. So, just realize that. And so look at it and say, oh, well, just because I can't do 8 by 20, 10 doesn't mean you can't do, something different. You can't do 10 intervals or 15 intervals or 20 intervals. Go 20 on, 20 off, 30 on, 15 off, 30 on, 30 off. 40 on, 20 off, whatever. I mean, you can try any of these different things. They will all work. They will all allow you to get a great workout. It's just doing it in a slightly different vein, and it's realizing that, hey, the Tabata protocol itself won't work for these things, but doing a tempo interval type protocol will. So hopefully that helps. Don't think you've got to shit can, these movements just because they won't work for Tabatas. Look at them from a tempo interval perspective. Dump the whole 8, I have to do 8 by 20 tens and, use a different number of intervals, time, or work to rest ratio and see what works for you. So hopefully that helps. Try it out. Let me know how it works for you. That's it for this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Like and share this video on Facebook, tweet it out on Twitter, and don't forget to get on my newsletter list. You'll see a link here in a second at the end of this video. Hit that link, enter in your email address. I'll let you know when all the new YouTube videos come out. I'll send you tips and advice on how to get stronger, build a muscular physique, really improve your cardio, get in fighting shape and fighting condition, and I'll even shoot you a free sample of Working Class Fitness Killer MMA workouts. Sound good? All right. See you next time. Train hard, rest hard, play hard.